Let's talk about Squarespace. That's right, we have a sponsor now, and that sponsor is Squarespace. And right now, Squarespace is partnering with TYT, our parent network, and they are gonna be offering up a 10% discount of your first trial. Squarespace is an awesome website where you can design your very own personalized websites for whatever you're working on in your life. I have some personal experience with the website. That is, my girlfriend, I guess now fiance, has a blog that she documents our own travels, our life together, and it's called Have Dog Will Drive. It's wonderful, and she created it with the help of Squarespace. Before this sponsorship even occurred, she just knew that it was the place to go to create a website that was simple and user-friendly and has gotten her some readers from all over the world. So check out her blog, Have Dog Will Drive, and also head over to squarespace.com/TYT for that 10% discount. I can't wait to see what you guys are working on. Welcome back to this final part of Murder with Friends. Today we're talking about the North Hollywood shootout, and where you're picking up with us, we're gonna be talking about what was the impact of the events of February 28th, 1997. So I'm just gonna begin this segment, Amir, by reading to you a couple things that went down with regards to police armament following the shooting, and then I also wanna talk about media coverage as well and how that played a role. So this is a quote from an article that I found in Police Magazine, so an unbiased source, that says the following. A month later, the chief of the Omaha, Nebraska Police Department asked its SWAT commander to write a position paper outlining the need and justification of arming our patrol personnel with intermediate 5.56 45mm rifles. With the backing of the chief and a strong-willed deputy chief who always remembered the streets from where he came, the department graduated its first patrol rifle class in November of 1997. So that's from Police Magazine. And then furthermore about police armament after the incident, 7 months following the incident, the Department of Defense gave 600 surplus M16s to the LAPD. Also, they were issued to each patrol sergeant. LAPD patrol vehicles now carry AR-15s to this day as standard issue with bullet-resistant Kevlar plating in their doors as well, because we saw from the shooting how the doors were just ripped apart by bullets.
Right.
They actually, for the 20th anniversary of the shooting, they have a lot of the stuff on display. They even have at the police museum in
really weird
Los Angeles mannequins.
Wax skull, yeah, mannequins of the two robbers.
Yeah, so they kept a lot from this day. The police view it as a
turning point,
huge turning point for them, and so they have all these police cars that were just drilled with bullets, and they bring them out as like, look at how far we've come, I suppose. Also, the LAPD authorized its officers to carry 45 ACP caliber semi-automatic pistols as duty sidearms. So there's that, and I want your response to how police responded.
This is a totally natural response just to from how Congress was dealing with the issue of weapons in the country. I don't really see how else the police could respond after something like this. Like, you have a force that's worried about these big weapons that clearly civilians have. How do you defend yourself against that? It's not like Congress is doing a good job at getting rid of these guns on the streets, and they can't. Like, in order to do that, you don't just say like, all right, we're banning assault weapons, deal with it. Like, Australia, after the Port Arthur massacre, they had a whole government-sponsored buyback program for weapons. America didn't do anything like that. So how they ended up reacting was like, okay, there's all this crazy firepower out there and we don't have it, so we need to have it to at least be on an even playing field.
But don't you think
as criminals,
it's puzzling that the response was to arm police and not that there was any sort of reform towards convicted criminals arming themselves?
Because there wasn't reform, and no one was gonna go to gun manufacturers and put the onus on them and be like, look, you guys keep making these weapons and you guys are gonna be responsible for like these weapons being in the wrong hands. No one was going to do that. There was too much money being made in the military industrial complex that existed at that point. So let's just make more guns and give them to the police. That's just more money being made by the powers that be.
So what you're saying is you feel that police officers felt that it would be too much of a, or at least police officers like it's gonna be way too much of a mountain to get any sort of reform, civilian reform, criminal reform with regards to gun.
I don't wanna make excuses for cops, but like that shouldn't necessarily just be on your city's police chief to have to go worry about that. That's something that has to do with Congress people and the lobbyists that are lobbying for these gun manufacturers. But like for the local PD or like even like LA's police department chief, like he's worried about the safety of his officers, right? And like he's not a politician. It's not his job to go and like try to make gun reform changes. So he's gonna do the quickest thing that he can and the fastest thing that he can to like protect his force from future incidents like this.
Yeah, and where I agree with you,
I'm playing a little devil's advocate here because like I'm a pretty strong advocate of gun control and whatever, but I can see why the things happened the way they did.
Yeah, and see that's where I'll go with you is that I don't come down either way. This is just sort of a history lesson of things that happened, and we can critique them. And what I think happened was the police departments saw what happened in North Hollywood and how the police, upwards of 300 officers were outgunned, firepowered by two, again, like Anna said in the narration, disorganized robbers who hadn't even really planned their getaway that well, hadn't really thought of any sort of a backup plan. And I think they weighed their options with that and they said, it is more likely that we will be able to obtain more guns than it is that our politicians will see this situation that unfolded and issue any sort of reform towards people with prior convictions and obtaining firearms.
Yeah, like, and also those assault weapons, they're already in circulation. So they need any advantage they can get at this point if something like this ever happens again.
What is your response when you hear people say things like a criminal that wants a gun is gonna find a way to get a gun even if you change laws so that it makes it more difficult for them?
I agree for the most part on that. If someone really wants to go out there and do something like that, they'll be able to find the way or they will get caught along the way trying to get there. And
how do you reconcile that with gun reform then? So basically my question is it all pointless?
No, it's not all pointless. It's a long process, but we need to put more responsibility on the people that are manufacturing these things.
Okay.
But we don't. And again, like there's billions of dollars in this industry, and why would they want to stop after they've already started production on these things? Like I brought it up before, like there was the Gulf War in the early 90s and new technologies were being discovered and made in weaponry. And you have these entire businesses and industries building these things. Why would they stop? It's not in their bottom line to stop producing these things, whether it's for civilian production, which was then banned in 1994, but then they turned the other way and they started producing it for the police.
Right, so it was a payday for these gun manufacturers.
This reform is gonna take so long, but like you need to chip away at it any way you can.
Yeah.
I think like I believe in the Second Amendment. I think you should be able to have guns. I'm not sure if you should be able to have assault rifles because that's kind of insane. These are guns made for warfare to kill other people, but I'm fine with making it really, really difficult to get the weapons as long as you can still get the weapons. And there needs to be some more common ground there.
So that's one component of the North Hollywood shootout, but another huge element that was impacted was media coverage, wall-to-wall news media coverage. Like Amir said in part one, you saw this as a kid unfolding on live television. And the impact of witnessing this go down and seeing Larry Phillip Jr. just kill himself on live television, you can't diminish that. So we're gonna talk about that, but first let's take a look at a package again from Anna.
After the news helicopters had left the area and television stations resumed their scheduled broadcasts, Los Angeles Times columnist Sean Hubler wondered, what does it mean that this vicious burst of human frailty could have looked for all the world like entertainment? What does it mean other than that the dramatized account of Friday's terrifying events will be coming soon to a theater near you?
So Amir.
It's pretty ominous.
It is.
Because looking back now, you see how many more crimes that happened, and just like a part of that motivation for the criminals that perpetrated them is they know that it's gonna make the news, and there's gonna be like this whole fanfare about it, right?
Yeah, but what I think is curious about this incident as well is that one, I grew up outside of the US. I had never heard of this before until you brought it to my attention last year. And two, the specifics of the events outside of true crime circles, I feel have largely been forgotten. And yet I also feel that the consequence of this broadcast live on television did desensitize other stations to bring similar sort of content to your screens. It makes it okay.
Ratings, dude. Like it's as simple as that. I bet before this shootout happened, like the highest rated thing on the news was maybe the O.J. Simpson case. I'm just throwing, I don't know if that's actually true, but the powers that be in media realize that these things like get a lot of good ratings. So let's like be on the scene and cover these as much as we can.
So you saw this go down on live television as a kid, and looking back, how do you feel about that? How do you feel that you were, what, 7 years old and you were staring up at it?
Again,
do you wish that there had been some sort
like
of?
I told you, when that happened, like in my memories, it was like in a movie or something. I can't believe that this was real. And you look back at this footage and it's insane. You don't see that often anymore.
Well, think about that, Amir. You thought it was a movie. You were comfortable with that sort of violence as long as it's a movie. Now, because that's how you understand violence as a kid, you see it happen, it's a movie, it's not real life, you don't know about that sort of thing yet. Now that you are an adult, you can look back and you recognize that you witnessed a man kill himself on television. A guy with an awful background and made a lot of bad decisions, and 2 kids that are now orphaned, basically. What do you think about the fact that you were able to watch that on television?
You desensitizes you, for sure. I mean, a lot worse things happened since that happened.
That's the thing. Do you feel that this set a precedent for live news coverage?
Maybe for a little bit, but I think the media since then, they get a lot more flack for running these kinds of things. I remember a few years back when I had just started working at TYT, Fox News was covering this chase that ended with the guy getting out of the car and shooting himself, and they didn't take it off air fast enough, and they got in big trouble for that. So we try to be a lot more careful nowadays in what we show on the news. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's sort of where I've come down as well.
There's a fine line, you know? Sometimes it's too much for entertainment's sake, but other times like there's things that should be shown on the news.
Right. And I also feel that, when I'm asking you these questions as when you were a kid watching it on TV, it makes me feel like, okay, but am I coming down on the side of censorship if I'm saying that they shouldn't have aired that on TV? It's a breaking news event. It's important, especially for people living in the area, to stay safe.
Yeah.
I don't want that information to be withheld from the public. I think that's worse. But
it was definitely a little bit more irresponsible in the 90s. And when I think more about it, there was like one time in the 90s on the 405 or some highway in LA, they filmed some guy on local news who was like severely depressed and he was upset with his insurance company, and he stopped his truck on the highway with a shotgun and like fucking blew his brains out, and then like lit his car on fire at the same time. And they showed all of that on local news. Like, that's so irresponsible. You shouldn't be going after that kind of stuff. But this case in particular didn't affect me as much as, for instance, Columbine did. And I have like really deep memories of that, and like I had nightmares when that happened.
Why? Do you think it's because it was 2 bank robbers who were robbing a bank that, even though they were violent, they weren't murderers?
Bank robbers fit a narrative easier than 2 kids going to school and just shooting a bunch of students for me.
Right.
It's like you know the whole trope of bank robbers and getting into a shootout with cops. Like there was movies leading up to this that happened. Like there was like the rumor that the 2 robbers, North Hollywood Shootout, they were watching the movie Heat, and they got a lot of inspiration for that. And there's other, like there was Reservoir Dogs that came out earlier in the 90s. Just like bank robberies is like, okay, like we know how this is gonna turn out. But 9/11, not 9/11, but that was also another one. But like Columbine affected me differently, and I think it affected kids our age a lot differently than something like this did.
What I'm thinking about right now is how we qualify killers. For example, I said just now they weren't murderers when in fact Larry Phillips Jr. had actually killed a man when he was trying to rob an armored car at a previous robbery. So he is a murderer. But I don't qualify him in the same category as I would the Dylan Klebold and whose name I'm blanking on from Columbine. Why? That's so weird. Both are murderers. One is, one is a mass murderer, one is a bank robber. But I think for some reason when we can understand a person's motivation, money, we can relate to that. Wouldn't it be nice if we all had more money? And in some ways, you're like, wow, these guys, they're saying fuck the man, fuck law enforcement. It's the 90s. This dream that I was promised is not happening. I'm the black sheep of the system because of I didn't pass a background check when I was trying to make an honest living, and so now I'm gonna rob a bank. And I think back on how audiences responded to Bonnie and Clyde when the original movie came out, and they liked that Bonnie and Clyde were sticking it to the cops and just going against the law because the law was keeping them down. And I think that that's why we qualify the bank robbers and the murderers at the North Hollywood Shootout differently than we do other cases. But that, I don't know. I don't think that's right.
I don't think it's right either. But do you think we'll ever look at these two the way we look at Bonnie and Clyde?
No.
Yeah, it's different, right?
Yeah, it's
these two are still. I mean, like they're all scumbags for killing people and like doing this, but. I don't know, Bonnie and Clyde, it's interesting that you bring that up. There's something so romantic about that, literally and figuratively.
Well, maybe if they'd been gay lovers, I would find it more romantic, but they were not. They were just bodybuilders. Well, I think that's gonna do it for the North Hollywood Shootout. There's a lot to get into on this. There's so much information, and I think we brought up a lot of perhaps controversial discussion topics, so I would love to talk about it with you guys in the comments section below. What do you think about the North Hollywood Shootout, motivations, police armament, media coverage, all of that? Let's talk it over. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more Murder with Friends, and we'll see you next time.